all of that being said, Matt, how, when you had that aha moment, that moment of release of that bondage that you'd carried for years and years, the the breaking of those boundaries, the lies that were being spoken that you had believed and agreed with, how did that change your parenting, especially with your child that was struggling specifically with connection and attachment?
Um, I think it's still a long process and a long
Yeah,
journey,
yeah,
really. I think we do anticipate sometimes, particularly in the Western world, that these moments of breakthrough will come and then everything will change.
yeah.
If we think that way, then the expectations that we will place on our kids is far too great.
Mm, great
We're,
point.
we're in it. We're in it for the long haul. Particularly, I mean, my 9 year old is highly intelligent, really gifted at sports. He has ADHD, but there's nothing really that would suggest that he is adopted or has any trauma background or anything like that.
Right.
Whereas the other one, she will probably, from a worldly point of view, struggle through life, which
Mm,
actually might just mean that she's happier than all of us and finds faith a lot easier to come to terms with than the rest of us
sure.
because she's quite simple, accepts it as it is, and her simple faith might just carry her through life with more joy than any of the rest of us can experience.
So
She's
true.
always joyful because she lives in the present moment. She doesn't understand consequences. She doesn't really grasp past, present, and future all that much. If you ask her what her favorite food is, it's whatever's in front of her. So she's pretty much always happy. And even when we get it wrong, 5 minutes later, she's back to being her cheerful, lovely self. And it may be that that never changes. And I think that's one of the things that I've had to come to terms with is that we may or may not see significant measures of healing in her. And even if we don't, we're still going to love her and try to love her the way that God loves us.
Yeah. I think that's amazing. And that's such a great perspective. And we've touched on that off and on the show of just redefining what success looks like and not just ascribing to that being one formula, one size fits all for every single person, because it really is true. And it's not fair to set one standard of success or progress with any of us, whether we've experienced trauma or not. So I think that's a really important point, Matt. I'm curious how, in the midst of you discovering this, you shared this moment where you had apologized to your parents, you were offering forgiveness, and the same with your wife. How has your marriage grown as a result of this journey?
It's grown massively. I mean, I think, but part of the reason the adoption nearly fell apart is that what was it, about 6 months in, whilst my wife was suffering with what we believed at the time to be post-adoption depression,
Yes.
she actually got diagnosed in her 40s with ADHD,
Okay.
and that suddenly made sense of all of everything that we'd been through over the years. It's not easy living in a household where 3 out of 4 people are neuro atypical
Yeah.
and or neurospicy, as some people like. I think my wife loves that term.
I like that.
And it's almost like sometimes they use it as a trump card. And I remember a conversation with my son, just saying to him that sometimes we have to give mummy some space, and because she has things that she struggles with, and so we have to cut her some slack and try and work together as a family unit. And he looked at me and he said, "But I've also got my issues. Are you going to cut me some slack as well?"
Oh, wow. Out of the mouth of babes, right?
Yeah. And so the levels of patience and long suffering love and all the rest of it that we have to learn about on a daily basis. But having said that, I mean, I think one of the things that I've learned throughout this process is that medical studies suggest that you only have to get it right 40% of the time And that beyond that level of what is deemed psychologically good enough parenting, there is little to no change in terms of the outcomes for the child. So you can get it wrong more often than not and still get the best outcomes for your kids. I think God, having designed it that way, is just absolutely phenomenal, frankly. So
Yes.
you might feel like you're failing, and you might be, but if you're still above the 40%, you're, you know, you're still doing enough to secure those outcomes for your children. And we have to rest in that. We rest in the fact that, failing is okay. Fail stands for first attempt in learning.
Yeah.
There is no such thing as failure. There's just opportunity to learn. And our kids teach us so much. And I
Yes.
think I wanted to come back to something you said before about brokenness, because I had a moment of realization. I think it was middle of last year on a communion Sunday, chatting with some other people from our church. And what I realized is that our kids carry in them a huge amount of brokenness,
Yeah.
and healing in many respects comes through that brokenness being transferred from them to us,
Mm.
and the parents carrying the weight of it upon their shoulders for the
Yeah.
healing of the child, which brings you straight back to 2000 years ago
Yes.
when he was broken for our healing. And I see a parallel between the way that we are bringing healing to our adopted children and what Jesus accomplished for us in dying on the cross.
Yes.
And there's a sense that we carry something of their brokenness, but that is bringing them healing. And it's painful, and I don't want to put anybody off from adopting, but the privilege of actually getting a glimpse behind the curtain into something of what was going on at the time. I mean, it's only a glimpse. I'm
Yeah.
not trying to suggest that it is like being Jesus, but actually the pain that we are caused to carry as adoptive parents and foster carers gives us an insight into a little bit of what Jesus went through on our behalf.
Yeah.
And that it's such a privilege to be called to walk in his footsteps and to emulate what he did for us for somebody else.